Hi everyone, this is Amy with Amy Cakes, and today I'm going to show you how to make a frozen buttercream transfer of Rubble from Paw Patrol. So this is my first transfer that I've ever done. It's the first opportunity I've had for an order for a cake. I have this coming weekend to do it, so I'm going to bring you guys along with me for my first attempt at a frozen buttercream transfer. I went ahead and got my picture off of line, and I just went ahead and inverted it 180 degrees on Microsoft Word, so it was already reversed for me. I've got it on a flat cookie sheet, and I've got my wax paper taped over it already. And then I used just a classic American buttercream recipe, half butter and half shortening. I've looked up a lot of recipes for the best thing to use for these transfers, and it seems to be the half and half fat content. So I went ahead and got my Wilton decorating icing from the store, since it's black, and I have all of my other icings ready to go in my Wilton bags. The colors I'm using for the bigger sections, I have bigger tips. So I have a tip number 4 for the yellow, which I'll show you the picture here in a minute that I'm doing. And then a smaller tip for the more defined areas that I'm going to be doing. And then I just have what number did I use for this? A number 7. I have a number 7 for the white to go around the border when I'm finished, along with filling it in. The cake I'm going to be putting on is just a quarter sheet cake with white icing. So I'm going to do a white background. I've done a lot of research on these, and hopefully it turns out okay. And here is the Rubble that I'm going to be doing. Okay, hopefully you guys can see this okay. I don't have a stand yet for my camera, so I've kind of got it propped up on some things. So hopefully I don't get in the way too much while I'm recording this. First, I'm just going to outline all of my black and get that done and pop it in the freezer to let it set. So I'll show you a few lines here. You want to keep your piping tip up off the parchment paper while you're piping this. That'll give you straighter lines and allow it to move the way you want it to a little better. On other things I've done, not transfers, I found that the shorter lines, personally for myself, I like doing shorter lines instead of a continuous line. For example, instead of continuing onto his head, I like to stop there. It seems to give me more control over my lines. Hopefully my hands aren't in the way too much for you guys to see. I watched a lot of videos on these transfers, and they seem to be a really great way to get a picture onto a cake. I'm a self-taught baker, and I have had many past experiences of trying to pipe pictures straight onto a cake, and it's really hard to fix once you make a mistake. So I'm just using a number 3 piping tip for this. I was going to use a number 4, but I was worried about my lines being a little too thick. And I'm glad I did, because this is the thickness I think that I'm happy with. I want to be able to separate all of his lines the best I can, so that when I come back in and fill in all the other colors, there's a good separation between them. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this border up, and then we will move on to the colors. Okay, so now that I've gotten my border done, the outline of Rubble, I'm going to go back in, and there's a few spots where the icing, I just wasn't squeezing hard enough, or I don't know if you guys can see in the video. Let me see if I can zoom. Yeah, you can see it. These little points that stick up where you end your line. I don't personally want those sticking up And I want to make sure, you want to go around and just make sure that all of your lines are together. And if you have any sections that maybe you put just a little too much icing in, I'm going to try to go in, like right here, I overlapped. And so you just want to make sure that's touching the wax paper, so that way it doesn't get lifted when you go to put the colors on. So there's not quite enough separation here. So you can just go in and try to separate it a little bit, or you can just leave it. Some might be easier than others. So I'm going to get all these together, make sure all my lines are touching the wax paper, like right here. The icing kind of overlapped itself and it was raised up off the wax paper. Definitely want to make sure that's touching, like right here. So that way when you go to put your colors in, it doesn't lift your border up and mess up your transfer. So I'm going to get these done. I'm going to pop this in the freezer to set this border for about 20 minutes, and then we will start with the color. Okay, so now that I've chilled my transfer for about 20 minutes, you can touch the outline with your finger and it's stiff, it doesn't move. And now I'm just going to go in and fill in all the little details, like the white of his eyes, and this wrench will be gray, along with this little wrench in his tag and his tooth, and get all those little details finished, so that when we go in with the main colors, you don't have to worry about leaving space for those little bits of color. You can just pipe right over them and it won't hurt it. I used a metal stainless steel cookie sheet. The reason I chose that is over plexiglass is because when you put this in the freezer, it stays cold when you bring it back out, and that'll allow your outlines to stay cold longer, giving you a bigger window to pipe these colors in. And if you don't have to freeze in between doing your colors, I just chose to be safe that my colors won't run. I've never used the decorator Wilton icing, so I'm not sure how it bleeds, or you know, the use of it. So I froze mine just to be safe, but you don't have to. If you want to just do it all at once and then freeze it for a longer period of time, that's totally fine too. So I'm going to get all the details filled in, like these whites of his eyes. I do have a number 7 tip on the white, which might be a little big for these smaller sections, but it won't hurt it once we go back over it with the more solid color. So I'm going to get these done and then we'll move on to the bigger sections. Okay, so now that I've gone in and filled in, sorry about my shadow, I've gone in and filled in the whites of the eyes and the tooth, and then I went ahead and did the gray of the wrenches and his collar, filled in with black, along with his tag on his collar. So now I'm just going in with the lighter color of his paws, and his face right here will be this lighter brown. If you start along the edges where your border is, it helps ensure that you don't miss filling in around every corner and every border. Make sure you get along the edge. So if you just kind of outline, and don't be afraid to go over like his toe lines, those are going to show in the front, so it doesn't matter if you cover them up in the back. It actually helps if you go over them to make sure that you filled in all the gaps. And I'm piping it kind of tall with this piping tip, because I'm going to come back in with a spatula and smooth it out some to help maybe bring out some of the lines and make sure that I don't have any air pockets like that one or that one. So I'm going to just go ahead and finish filling in his face, and then we'll move on to the yellow. Okay, so I have all my colors filled in, and as you can see, you can't see where the eyes are, or I missed a spot, which is fine because I can go ahead and show you. So this is where the little wrench is with his tag for his collar, and since that color is already down first, you're going to see that in the front. So you can go ahead and go in and fill the yellow over top of this, and that'll only help ensure that you covered everything and there's no holes. You can even go ahead and go over his collar, because you're not going to see this yellow because the black's in front of it. So when you flip it over onto the cake, you won't be able to see that. So now that I've got all those done, you generally want to border and cover your transfer in whatever color icing that you're going to be icing your cake in. So in my case, I'm going to be icing my cake in white. So I've just got a Wilton 12-inch piping bag filled with white icing, and I got the number 7 tip, so I still have, see if I can get it to come into focus. So I still have the round tip on the end like I've been using for the rest of the transfer, just a little thicker so that we can get a thicker line. So the first thing I'm going to do, sorry for my arms in the way, so I'm going to go around and just border the entire thing with white, so that when you flip it over onto the cake, it has the same colored border that your cake is iced in. That way it will blend in a little better, and you can even do a little piping work around the transfer once you've got it on your cake, and that'll help blend it in even more. So you don't have to be too neat with this, just do a single border line all the way around. Make sure to fill in between all the legs. These gaps that you have too that are in between the legs, depending on what kind of picture you're using, if you have gaps like that, for example, like right here where his ear sticks off, I'm going to fill that in, and that'll help make sure that once your transfer is frozen, when you go to flip it onto your cake, it'll help stabilize that ear, because that ear is a little smaller and it's hanging off by itself. So it'll help stabilize that ear to make sure it doesn't break off on you when you're putting it onto your cake. So I've just got a couple peaks right here. I'm going to use my toothpick. I really apologize for the shadow, guys. I'm right-handed, so I didn't want to put you on the other side of me and then you wouldn't be able to see what I was doing. So I'll have to sacrifice with the shadow. Alright, so once you have your white border around, then you can literally just take your white icing and go over the entire transfer. Try to make it even. Try not to build it up in one area more than others. Make sure you go all the way to the edge. So I'm just going to continue that until the entire thing is covered. Then we're going to pop her back in the freezer and let her harden up. Okay, so now that I've got my transfer all covered with the white, you just want to take I'm using an offset spatula. I'm going to go around the edges and just make sure that there's no gaps in the icing, especially along the edges. Make sure it's all filled in, and just gently go over it back and forth to smooth it out, just to help make sure you don't have any air bubbles in there. Since I did lines the way that I did back and forth, I have quite a few air bubbles along the edge, just where the lines didn't quite come together, and that's totally fine. You can just go in and smooth them out, but make sure you don't press too hard. You really don't have to apply a lot of pressure while you're doing this, because you don't want to, all the colors I just filled in underneath are not frozen yet, so I did not freeze it in between doing this and doing the other colors. You can, depending on how this one turns out. I may in the future, but you don't want to press too hard because it will smash those colors together and may make your initial features on the front of Rubble smear together, and you don't want that. I'm sure what I've seen on other videos is once you flip it over, there's a few flaws that you can go back and just touch up with your icing once you have the transfer in your cake. So I'm going to finish up this top layer here. I'm going to go around, make sure to get all the air bubbles out. I'm going to stick it in the freezer for a good half hour to an hour, and we'll try to get it off here and show you guys. I'm actually not putting it on the cake until tomorrow, so I'm going to keep it in the freezer overnight. But I will definitely take it off to show you guys what it looks like, and hopefully I will have my first success for Amy Cakes for a frozen buttercream transfer. Okay, so really quick, I just wanted to show you guys the finished Rubble from Paw Patrol. I froze him for about a half an hour, and I just flipped him over onto this drying rack. But since I'm not using him until tomorrow, I'm going to flip him back over on the pan and let him sit in the freezer overnight. And as you can see, All my lines turned out pretty well, so I think this was a success for my first frozen buttercream transfer. Thanks for watching.